That's just your body saying, everybody leave me alone. I need some deep, deep healing. Here is the inner critic beating you up constantly, just bashing yourself with trash talk or limiting beliefs. We all have an inner critic, but with trauma, it's really loud and really mean or really ever present. Maybe you need something really restorative, like maybe it's a practice or a nourishment or rest, downtime, solitude, nature.
Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. I'm your host, Karen Oman, co-founder of Divorce Workshop. Today we have a special guest, Ramona Kossowan, who's coming on to talk about coming back home to yourself after divorce, meaning not just your mind, but also your body and spirit. Ramona is a gentle trauma release practitioner, personal empowerment coach. With over a decade of experience coaching women in health and fitness, Ramona's felt a strong desire to offer more support, more transformation, and more lasting change. This is why she wholeheartedly embraced the opportunity to become a certified gentle trauma release practitioner, becoming the first graduate in Canada in 2021. Her priority is to create a safe, supportive space where clients can reconnect with their resilience, creativity, and most importantly, their inherent worth. Welcome, Ramona, to the show.
Thanks so much.
So I'm just going to ask you, the first thing is, what exactly do you do to help divorcing people in your profession?
Well, I look at divorce through the lenses of the emotions, the nervous system, and trauma, but also recognizing that it is a life transition that has a lot wrapped up in it. So I see it as even a catalyst for recognizing that they've got some unfinished business that they need to tend to in their body, their heart, their mind, their soul. And they might have been dragging that all along to some extent, but then divorce just pushes you so far past your resilience threshold that you have this cascading effect of symptoms that either come out of nowhere or just dramatically get worse, physical, emotional, and cognitive symptoms. So divorce is a catalyst to really push you to the point where you realize, okay, I need to do something. I'm not feeling like myself. I'm not resilient. So I look at it through those lenses.
Yeah, as I was saying before, we recorded that my own journey is I finally left an abusive marriage of 19 years. And my body after, which I didn't really know, I was exhausted. I was irritable. I could sleep, stressed out, hypervigilant, So this is a really important topic because I think in society, we talk about, recovery and we talk about practice mindfulness or rebuilding your life. But I think what's really important is how our bodies are feeling, like you said, as you just said. So what are some of the common symptoms? Like I mentioned a few of my own, but what are the common symptoms that you see in a lot of these women that have gone through divorce?
Well, with your situation, it was exacerbated because you were also experiencing blatant abuse prior to the divorce. So even if you're saying, well, that's not me, it wasn't abusive, were you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, powerless, not heard, not worthy, not lovable for an extended period of time? Because that is also trauma. So what you're mentioning, the exhaustion, if we're looking at from a nervous system perspective, when we are facing with an emotional, with a threat of some kind, it can be physical, emotional, social, financial, not just really obvious stuff like physical abuse. we have an immediate response to distress. So we are all familiar with a fight or flight response, and we get the rush of hormones and energy to mobilize us. But if that's not possible, which is often the case in relational trauma, which is ongoing and never ending, then we go into freeze. And from there, you can go into shutdown. Now, even for you, like the exhaustion and the needing to sleep, that makes perfect sense after leaving a heightened threat situation. Because once you're like, okay, I'm safer, your body goes into deep healing. Deep healing. So sometimes when people go from having been in an unhealthy relationship or feeling unsupported to being in a healthy, supportive, safe, loving relationship, suddenly their body fully relaxes, and then you're deeply healing. So that need for extra sleep, stillness, downtime, lack of tolerance for crowds, excessive socializing, stimulation, that's just your body saying, everybody leave me alone. I need some deep healing here. But it's quite often I will see the pendulum swing from overly busy, like the busy bee, to shut down. So full on couch potato, Netflix, chips, wine, whatever, can't even do the most basic things that need to be done. There's a pendulum swing between those two things. And that's a dysregulated nervous system. Whereas when we're feeling resilient, we can come back to that middle ground. We can do what we need to do. We can connect. We can get stuff done when we need to. We can relax when we need to. So that resilience is missing physically, emotionally, and mentally.
So that would make sense why many women, or men, I suspect, whatever gender, why they feel so exhausted. And when you're going through the divorce, you have so many things you have to do at the same time, right? Like you have to deal with the lawyers, you have to deal with the children, so if your nervous system is just swaying between whoever you're swaying, because I've also had clients that I can't move, right? Like they've just shut down, like you said.
Exactly.
So what are the things that can make people more aware? Like we talked about, okay, if you're eating chips on the couch or if you're overactive. I mean, I have a sister that's so overactive, like she's so busy that it's almost wondering why she's so busy, right? So
Yeah.
is it just learning and understanding how your body feels? Like, is that an awareness
Yeah.
piece?
I honestly don't think anyone could go through divorce and separation without benefiting from some trauma work. I really don't know how that's possible because it's such a deep and massive transition on so many levels. There's so many endings. I don't know how you could get through that without doing some trauma work. I just don't know. But do I feel safe in my body? Do I enjoy my own company? By safe in my body means, can I sit with stillness and be okay with that? Do I feel a sense of ease? Can I feel peaceful? Can I connect with people in a healthy way and receive love and kindness, not just give? Because overperforming and overfunctioning is often connected to trauma, right? Where you can do all the things for everyone else, but not yourself. So are you able to care for your body? Are you able to cultivate habits that support your well-being without needing to justify it? Is the inner critic beating you up constantly, just bashing yourself with trash talk or limiting beliefs? We all have an inner critic, but with trauma, it's really loud and really mean or really ever present. There's a litany of physical, emotional, and cognitive symptoms that can be connected to trauma. So what you can look for is what came out of nowhere. What suddenly became an issue that's never been an issue? What suddenly got worse for no apparent reason? So this can be autoimmune conditions, gut problems, immune issues, sudden, issues with weight gain or loss, sleep, like it just goes on and on. But just when did I stop feeling like my old self? In some cases, some symptoms have been lifelong, and that can be just patterns that emerged in childhood, and then they were just reinforced with a relationship.
How about emotional not being able to regulate?
Yeah,
Is that would that be one that people might,
absolutely.
yeah?
So this can look like chronic underlying anxiety all the time, because
Hmm.
any and all emotions just feel like anxiety. Like you don't feel like you have the capacity to feel literally anything, and then you start feeling anxious about the fact that you're feeling anxious, right? It becomes this prison of anxiety, and I'm saying outside of, say, a condition that needs medical treatment. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
but
just talking, not having a medical condition, because you don't feel safe to feel anything. So that can show up as avoidance. So you're busy, 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 distracted, overperforming, overfunctioning, porous boundaries, yes to everything, no to yourself, can't sit still. Um, and then that will eventually swing into shutdown,
hmm.
where you just flatline a little bit.
So I guess it goes on this, like as you said, it's a pendulum, right?
Yeah.
So you've named some of the symptoms of like what are they can. So what are some of the things that, and what are some of the things that would be helpful for them to try to do to, one, we talked about awareness, these are some of the symptoms. And what about things that they could do to help themselves?
Well, I look for, so if you're, depending where you're at, like you might be in the middle of a divorce or separation, or maybe you've emerged from it recently, or it might be 8 years past. Because quite often I connect with people who are 8, 10, 15 years past, still experiencing the symptoms. Because that's how trauma works. It doesn't care about timelines. Your nervous system doesn't work like that. But I look for a couple things that would be super valuable as you're just getting your feet under you, is practicing deep self-care. So the self-care you need right now may look a little different than what you've been told is self-care, like exercising every day and meal planning on Sundays. I mean, not those are bad things, but maybe you need something really restorative. Like maybe it's, a practice or a nourishment or rest, downtime, solitude, nature. What is deep self-care for you that makes you feel really held? Because you need to hold yourself first, right? Even like if you have children, yes, of course you're going to care for your children's needs, but you need to be pouring into yourself, this vessel, so that you can be that grounded person for your children. So deep self-care would be the first thing I would look at. What makes me feel nourished, held, supported, rested? This will be unique to the person. And don't push yourself. And the next thing I would do is start building your village, rebuilding after divorce or separation, whether it's recent or ongoing. Sometimes the courts have been weaponized against you and it's a never ending onslaught of trauma. Build your village of supporters. So this may be professionals who support you with the logistics of divorce, like that's not my wheelhouse, or other areas that you need support, like whether it's men or women who understand what you're going through. Because if you're in a miserable divorce and you were abused and you feel shame about this, do you want to go hang out with the soccer moms who are not experiencing those problems and try to pretend that you're normal? And I'm using this, obviously you're normal, but you don't need to be pretending all the time that you're okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking for that first year that I was, anytime I would get a phone call or an email, my whole system, I could feel it went into nervous anxiety mode, right? And I really had to work on that. So what you're saying, and what I just want to like say is that the trauma that I felt through that continues on until you work at processing it in your body, right?
Yes, it's a bodily response, like it affects your brain, it affects everything. But what I find really exciting and hopeful about this is that when it's addressed in the body, strategically, your brain changes. You think differently, which is really super cool. Because I was just talking to a woman this week. She's like, the inner critic is gone. And it wasn't me coaching and coaxing her along and constant affirmations and mindset work. No, working with the trauma strategically and then working with the aftermath of trauma strategically tells your body, oh, that's processed. It's not a current threat anymore. So your body knows that and it goes, okay, I'm going to file that in this filing cabinet over here as processed. And I'm safe now. And your brain starts to work differently, which is really exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. And it's part of what the work you do.
Exactly. And it's so simple, which is really exciting.
Yeah, because the trauma field is quite like it's newer, right? Like it's not because as you said before, like why is this not more awareness, right? Like why is like everyone that goes through divorce, they have some element of this, right? There's,
Yes.
like what 90%, 10% high conflict, 80% are moderate, and there's like that. And these are all just numbers, not perfectly, researched, but 10% are amicable. You think of all that and think of what your body has to go through. So why isn't it, so it's fascinating, and it's also an essential tool that you're giving people, along with all their other things that they need to help um, them learn to. And I think that you can correct me, but if they do some work with you or working on their trauma, would their recovery, making meaning again in life or recovery, would it be stronger?
Oh, immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Immensely. I can't even emphasize that enough because I've just been through this journey hundreds of times, right? It's immensely. It doesn't mean that you're not going to allow yourself grace and integration, but there's different stages. There's at first addressing traumatic events, memories, and emotions directly and strategically and gently. And then there's clearing the aftermath. So that's where you're rebuilding your sense of self, and rebuilding behaviors that support this empowered version of you, right? Versus the survival version of you. And then the next step is also being equipped to maintain your well-being long term. So those are all stages, but the curve is shortened so drastically. I can't even tell you. Like it goes from, you know, months and months and months and years to weeks and months. It doesn't mean that every aspect of your life is rebuilt magically, but you can experience so many improvements and so much more peace and resilience uh, with this sort of approach. Then you're not struggling with it all the time.
I also want to ask you too that if the effects of if you do not work on the trauma, right? Because there is physical issues that can come up, or mental, or even maybe even spiritual. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, like sometimes I talk to people, like one woman I connected with, she is 8 years past her divorce. So you would think, well, that you're moving right along. No, no.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get stuck. So when I hear people say I'm stuck, that's in the emotional level of apathy on the map of consciousness. And there's usually something underneath that we want to get curious about and release so that you can rise up to where your courage is, which is a few notches up the ladder. Um, I mean, yes, there's certainly things that can improve, even if you aren't addressing your trauma directly, depending on the extent of it. I also like to consider what your life was like prior to the marriage and prior to the divorce. So if you, for example, grew up in a chaotic household, that sense of self or patterns of codependency or people pleasing or other things, they simply carry into your adulthood. So it was just re-traumatization that was already there. So let's say you grew up in a good enough environment where you felt supported, safe, lovable, worthy, and could develop into a more authentic version of you. That makes a big difference. And also the kind of support you have going through and on the other side of divorce. Do you have safe, supportive people in your life that can hold you through it? Because I find carrying that burden alone really magnifies the effect of trauma, because we are relational. We're meant to heal in relation. So that's a big part of the picture is what's your foundation going into it and what is your village of support going through.
Yeah, I'm a big component.
I'm a big supporter of support systems too, especially with trauma, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think there was a Vanderkook, Bessel Vanderkook. He talks about that. Like, the more supportive systems you have in place, the better off you're going to be. But that varies for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, some people in divorce, they have family that enable the ex, right? And
Exactly. So
mhm.
you have, on top of what you've already been through, you have ongoing betrayal, ongoing gaslighting, ongoing invalidation, or maybe even just being questioned. Like, this is what people actually say to some of my clients. Are you sure it's trauma?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so you feel kind of like, oh, I don't know. I didn't have it as bad as that person over there. I didn't go to war. Nobody died. So, and in the meantime, their body is so stressed they can hardly breathe, right? So I'm looking at them with such compassion and also so excited that I get to help them, because it's like, I'm so glad that you put your hand up and said yes to receive this support. I'm so glad that you chose healing, because there's absolutely something better for you on the other side of it. You don't have to
Mhm.
struggle alone. It's not a flex to struggle alone.
No, and it makes life much harder. Like, if I had known you 7 years ago, or was aware that my body was reacting the way it was, I would have reached out, right? But I didn't. This is all such more newer field, right? And
Yeah.
um, so before everyone, I have a question for everyone, my divorce professionals, before we wrap up. Uh, for someone who is just separated, whether they left or were left, what advice would you give to help them navigate the overwhelming early days?
Well, I'll go back to that deep self care. So I would even do a little bit of journal and reflection, or discuss with someone you really feel safe with, trust, and has your best interest at heart. What does deep, deep, deep self care look like for you, right? You need to be nourished and held through this difficult transition. And if you don't have a lot of resources yet, which you typically don't, we don't go into marriage with divorce resources, right? So what kind of support do I need to navigate this? Whether it's, legal advice, and some of the more technical stuff, and then support groups or other communities that align and vibe with me, that understand some of what I'm going through. Because if you're navigating a high conflict divorce, I think sometimes you need a space to go and not pretend that everything's cool. It doesn't mean that you need to commiserate all the time, but sometimes people in your old community will kind of expect you to just be the same old you.
Mhm.
You're not the same old you, right? So sometimes it's hurtful to have to go and pretend and put on a face all the time. So you might need to build other communities and other relationships where you can be really a little bit more real. Like, again, it's not that you have to be emotionally dumping or always commiserating, but you can just be real. Like, hey, I'm in a rough place. This has been a very difficult week, and not pretend to be the same old version of you that people thought you were while in that relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty common for people to do that,
Of
you
course,
know.
they don't understand, and it's okay. You don't need to try to make them understand. Some people will be able to accompany you on that journey, but some people just don't have the awareness, or they're just not that vested in the relationship. So, like, if you're in a community, and the community just kind of expects that you're going to be the same old person and keep up the brave front, that's exhausting.
Mhm.
And it's not because they're bad people, but sometimes you need a place where you can let your armor down a bit and be real, and with people who get it, and you don't have to try to explain, or they don't tell you to look on the bright side or anything like that.
Yeah, that's important. I really love what you talked about today about the deep self-care. I think that is vital for
So
anybody.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's powerful. I We're not just talking about, you know, the easy self-care stuff, like go and get your
No.
nails done. We're talking about really, I mean, getting your nails done is great. I'm just
Sure.
saying really deep, whatever that works for you, as you said, is so
Yeah.
unique. Like, for myself, it's being in the forest,
Wonderful.
surrounded by that, right? It's always been my go-to. That's the thing. You have to find that deep, but I really, really think that's great advice for everybody at the beginning too, is to find
Absolutely. You
deep,
need
deep.
TLC, and you've got to feel fully worthy of giving yourself absolute TLC. And this will allow you to be present for the people that rely on you in your life.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, is there anything that we missed today that you?
Well, I think it's. I always like to think about an inside-out approach. So if you're thinking maybe you've emerged from the divorce and you've dusted yourself off a bit, you might start to get focused on, well, maybe I want to get my body back. I've been neglecting myself. I've gained 15 pounds or whatever, or this or that, right? It's cool to have a vision and goals and things you desire, but I like to think about an inside-out approach. So how am I nurturing the person I want to become, rather than focusing on external or like a frenetic energy sort of do, right? So honor your capacity along the way. So even if you take smaller steps toward what you desire, like say, I want to get fit and athletic like I was 10 years ago. Well, respect your capacity, because you're not the same person you were 10 years ago, and go in steps that don't feel overwhelming to your nervous system. So that's the values that I hold, even as a fitness professional and a food relationship coach, is we need to meet you where you are at right now and let go of the need to perform or please in this process, and make it about you feeling good in every step of the way. And you know, you'll move the needle towards your desires, but think of it as, I'm becoming this person. I'm becoming the person who prioritizes sleep. I'm becoming the person who chooses nourishing foods most of the time. I'm becoming the person who moves your body, but I'm not trying to do this super hard stuff that I've been told I need to do because I can't do it right now. Honor that.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah. Is there anything like you want to mention that where they can get in touch with you? I mean, it'll be all in their show notes and stuff, but anything that before we wrap
Yeah.
up?
Well, I have. I can't remember if I gave you my website that's opening soon. I've just finished it. It's gentletraumacoach.com. And aside from my Ramona K coaching, so that one's just about me as a gentle trauma release practitioner. So you can do a little deeper dive and explore at gentletraumacoach.com. I have a free resource there that you can download and explore, gentle trauma assessment, to look at symptoms and connect the dots and help to maybe get curious about whether some of the symptoms that you're experiencing are trauma related. And there's more to come. So if you choose that free download, you'll be in my email community. So when I have ongoing workshops or newsletters or blogs, I can share that with you.
That's great. I do think it needs to be more awareness. I think more people need to know about your services, because as we said throughout this podcast, that going through divorce, there are many elements of trauma that we all feel. Some are worse than others, but I think everyone could benefit from this. So thank you for coming on today.
I'm thrilled and delighted, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.